If you're going to be a winner, you're going to need a coach.
Sharpening doesn't happen by accident. A blade left untouched will rust, and a man left unchallenged will stagnate. Every man needs friction, resistance, and a whetstone to grind away weakness and reveal his true edge. Welcome to the Whetstone, where we reject comfort, disrupt the status quo, and forge men ready for impact. Hosted by Dredd, Dark Helmet, and me, the Plague. This is where men step out of the drift and into acceleration, because iron sharpens iron, and no man sharpens alone. Rocket socks.
Rocket socks?
Yeah, you know, it's a new product
No one's ever
out
heard
there.
of that.
For
No one's
rocket
ever heard
socks
of
for
that.
the 4th of July.
There's no such thing as a rocket sock. And even if there was, I don't think that McGee makes them. And so I don't have any interest in rocket socks. I am interested in one sock and one sock alone. And that is the McGee sock. Why? It checks all the boxes, Blake. It's durable.
My kind of sock.
Yeah, it's your kind of sock. It's durable. It's manly. It doesn't stink over time. And it's comfy on the foot. Especially if you get like the ruck socks. I'll just go ahead and tell you. There's like a little extra cushion in there. A little extra padding in the ruck sock. It's quite nice. It's quite nice. And in fact, now that we mentioned it, I think it might even be a 4th of July sale kind of a thing happening on the gear store. You can get the McGee ruck boots, the speed ruck boots, of which I do own a pair. And I was shocked. I did not want to like them when Malco said, here, why don't you try these? I did not want to like them. I was like, that's not, I don't think that's any, like, come on. Shoes. Lots of people do shoes. You're not a shoe guy, Malco. Stick to what you know, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Well, he knows shoes because it's in partnership with this, I think it's like a Finnish company or something. Anyway, they are incredibly durable boots. And they're kind of a lower top. Italian Job wore them in a Spartan race in North Carolina, which I thought, I don't know if I'd run in boots. And he was like, no, these are solid trail shoes. Those, the obstacle where you go in the water and then you go up like this, just it's impossible mud hill of death and stupid. It's just so stupid. Yeah. And people are like having to drag me up because I got nothing. He just walks up this thing in those boots. So the bite on those soles is impossibly good. They are ridiculously light. Like you can barely tell you're wearing them. They really are a good speed rack. And I believe you can get $40 off on those monsters right now. If you were to go to f3gear.com and procure yourself a pair. The only appropriate thing to wear underneath the speed ruck boot, of course, however, is the ruck sock. So get yourself some McGee socks because life's too short to wear crappy socks.
Is that the tagline though?
I just made it up one time
like
on here. So it's not really the tagline. It's like the Whetstone tagline.
It could be.
It could be.
I'm
not a marketing genius. I'm not a marketing genius. I leave those things to Malco. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, because if you have feet, you need socks, right?
That's
not bad either. If you're gonna have feet, you might as well have socks. If you're not gonna have feet, you could have a different kind of sock, no toes. You could just slip them. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, if guys are interested, we have plenty of previous episodes where we covered entities without feet. Man, we've had some really great conversations. I have to continue to emphasize how much I appreciate you guys just taking time to talk me through this. I can't help but notice, as we're talking through these various topics, we inevitably we get back to some of those proximate relationships. Like as I listen through, we sort of take things back to the relationship with your M, right? We had an episode where we were talking about the Proverbs 31. And so I really think what's cool to me is like, doesn't seem to matter what the topic is. We're really looking at them through some of the lenses that we'd like to teach F3 guys to look at things through, which is really cool. I thought, as we're thinking about today and really tomorrow, right, is 4th of July, Independence Day here in America, right? And even though F3 is an international network, we really want to kind of dive into freedom. What does freedom sort of mean? We've got our sort of foundational book, Freed to Lead. And so would love to just sort of talk through, some things that I don't know, come to mind for me, like, I did not serve in the military, know several guys that
Nor did I.
have, but sort of this idea of, like what does freedom mean, right? Are we sort of freed from something, or are we freed to do something? Would maybe be a place to start. Would love to kind of hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Could it not be both? Are we not both freed from and to? I mean, different things, but right? Freed from tyranny, freed to other things, right?
Tell me more.
Well, I mean, you asked the question in that way, and I just think that the beauty and maybe this isn't exactly F3 chat, right? Because I think it's kind of a broader cultural discussion, maybe, right?
Yeah.
But I used to say even early on in F3, like the fourth F is freedom, right? It's kind of an implied principle, is that, because there are places right now where guys have tried to launch F3 and tried to launch a workout, and the government has said we don't assemble, and because they don't have that freedom in foreign countries, right? And so they're not able to launch there. They've tried a couple times and been shut down, and so they have to try and figure out, like, well, can it even happen? If it does, what would it even look like? And unfortunately, I mean, at present, in public, outside like that, it's not a right that they have. And so, I would say, even when I was running around helping old C-SPAN, launch regions and different things like that, I would often tell guys that the fourth F was freedom, because without that, we'd be standing by a shovel flag with shovel in the ground, and by golly, the colors on the top, right? That if without the freedom that we enjoy in this country, we wouldn't even be able to do this. We wouldn't exist. We wouldn't, and even other countries right now that are free, that are kind of more first worldish, and you wouldn't expect this kind of stuff, have problems with actual freedom.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a guaranteed right to freedom of speech. They don't have a guaranteed right of freedom of assembly. They don't have guaranteed rights. Like, you would think they're kind of free, and it's kind of happened that way for a long time, but it ain't in the law. And I'm here to tell you, look around, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there is sort of a uniqueness, and that makes, and part of what makes this work in F3, and any good thing work, is the right to be free, the ability and the latitude to do as you see fit for yourself, right? So.
Yeah. How do you, because I think in an earlier conversation we were sort of talking about, in the book, right, Free to Lead is like, talks about unshackling, right? So that sort of gives this picture of a man in chains, right? So is there some aspect of sort of freedom from maybe sad clown syndrome that we're hoping guys would receive as they participate in F3?
We're not granting them the right to be free from sad clown, but we're giving them a framework to free themselves.
Yeah.
Right? When you say Dredd? I mean, that's the... Not really?
Guess I feel like, a guy's got to want to be free, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, he can free himself, but we can't give him that. We're not any, granting him any kind of freedom. The freedom exists. Now, whether he decides to kind of walk through that freedom door or not, I guess is his own business. But, and I would also just kind of, as we're talking through this from maybe a little bit more philosophical standpoint, Dredd and I have had this conversation, and I think we may disagree somewhat on the mechanism, but I think we generally agree on the fact that part of what I believe we've been put on this planet to do is to learn how to use our agency, which regardless of where you live, regardless of what your government believes, regardless of any of that, you do have freedom in your own mind, your own heart. You're not freedom from consequence necessarily, right? But you do have freedom to think what you want to think, and freedom to, within certain constraints, I suppose, to live how you want to live, right? It's certainly within the, in America, it's a little different, right? I mean, we got a lot more freedom, but the idea that our job, like one of the main purposes for us being on this planet, is to learn and to make a decision to use our agency in order to submit our will to God's will, right? That's my belief, right? That's part of what we're supposed to be learning how to do. And so it's funny sometimes how, because guys will be like, well, if you're submitting to something, you're not really free. I'm like, well, that's the great paradox, big, right? Because, submitting to something bigger than yourself for a greater cause, and recognizing that there's a singular mission and there's no prescribed way to get that done. No one prescribed way to get that done, right? Actually gives me all the freedom I could possibly want in a lot of ways. Just thinking out loud.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I do think there's a lot of, well, I can speak for myself, right? When I showed up to F3, I was, abdicating my agency, but also really chained, in drugs and alcohol. And I guess to me, F3, to your point, Helmet, it sort of showed me that there was this other side, that freedom from those things was an option. And I think the other guys really modeled that for me when I showed up, and really helped me sort of slowly, climb back into my capsized boat, sort of would be the other metaphor I think of, right? As I was trying to initially just get right. But what, so this might be kind of a silly question, but I would be curious, as you're thinking about,
is it about socks? That would be a silly question.
Yeah, like what kind of socks did George Washington wear? I don't know.
He wore stockings.
They were
Stockings.
I was gonna say probably more.
Yeah, and a
All
wig.
right, go ahead.
Right?
What were you gonna say? Go ahead.
No, curious how you think we see like some early evidence of free to lead in some of those early founding fathers. I don't know, as they declared independence. I would be curious if we see some of our framework from F3 show up there.
Well, I would hope it would track back to. I hope that if Thomas Jefferson, George Washington stumbled across what we were doing, they would recognize it. I would expect also that they would be disturbed that it was necessary. So that, I don't think they could fathom. I think I was listening to Supreme Court had rendered a ruling today that said that the state of Texas could require a pornographic website to have somebody getting on there, put their age, like state their age, that was not an undue burden on their on freedom of speech. And it's unlikely that whether or not pornography, you can argue about whether pornography is protected speech, but I doubt that the founding fathers were sitting around debating that. Yeah. That wasn't a debate that they were having. But we
probably hadn't really conceived of the idea, right?
Yeah.
I see the biggest. I think people in America, we talk about freedom all the time. Men talk about freedom. We expect freedom, but it's. I believe that men in America, too many men are afraid to really say what they believe. And if you believe it, you should be willing to say it. But if you're willing to say it, you have to be capable of defending it. And I don't think I don't think most men are capable of doing that.
I was gonna say, I think that's why they fear to say it. Like they may even say to themselves, well, I know what I believe, but I'm not comfortable enough to have to defend it against somebody. So I'll either just keep to myself, or maybe even pretend like maybe I don't believe anything very strongly, or any number of things.
I think you see the tendency to pretend to believe what is the popular set of beliefs at the time. And to not stand up for what they really believe because they're afraid that it'd be inconsistent with the current cultural, what I call the cultural catechism. Cultural catechism says something, and they're like, I'm afraid to fight against it. And I think that to me is a subtler form of imprisonment. To be imprisoned by your own lack of conviction, to me. And I think that was part of.
It's like you're not even in chains, but as they're walking the prisoners down, you're like, well, those guys are going to get a couple. Maybe I'll just walk with them. So you're not even in the chains, but you're just like walking in the pack.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right. So I don't think you had. I always, we tend to obviously mythologize historical figures. You mythologize the historical figure you most admire, and so we have probably mythologized the founding fathers. I know we certainly have. And imagine them standing up and, the hell you say, I won't, we're never getting rid of the penny. I'm fighting for whatever. And maybe it wasn't like that. Maybe they were under the same pressures then as we are now, but in a different way. I just don't see as much evidence historically for the kind of unmasculine sense of obedience to popular culture that we have now.
Yeah.
Unwillingness to fight.
Well, and with some of that maybe drift from maybe what our founding fathers of America had in mind, I would be curious what like in F3. So there's this interesting thing, right, where some of it to me is just we don't tell each other the hard truths, right? But I've noticed in my relationships, I feel more comfortable telling the truth and giving feedback, and maybe it's candor, but like that's easier for me with a guy who I know is in F3. And so I don't know, like, how do we teach that? Or I guess, how do you see that coming to fruition in F3?
Okay. So I feel like what we're doing in F3 is just simply a continuation of what America has always stood for. Having a simple set of common values that we say constitute virtue, and to be about seeking virtue in all we say and do in all aspects of our life, every relationship, every transaction, whether it's business or personal, whatever, is to be virtuous. And the way that you become virtuous is through fitness, fellowship, and faith. And if you're accelerating those areas in your life, it'd be more likely that when you encounter a conflict, and when that conflict is tempting you to be unvirtuous, these are some strengths upon which you can draw because you've worked them into your body and soul. To me, that's what F3 is supposed to be, and that you don't have to define it every single time. That's not virtuous. How do you know it? I know vice when I see it.
It doesn't hold up against the framework that we, the 5 core principles.
That's right. We have a common set of values that is flexible, that can tolerate difference. But one of them is, and F3 has always been from the very start, is you get to speak your mind. And that the remedy for unwanted speech is not silence, it's more speech. I mean, that's kind of
better
an F3,
speech, right?
Well, it doesn't have to be better.
Or not better, but I mean making a better argument, right? Or
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess
seeking,
yeah, that's the next step, would be argument, which is just the juxtaposition of opposing viewpoints in order to learn. But you couldn't get 14 people in America to agree on the definition of argument.
Yeah.
So these are, I mean, who is it in the Bible? Hezekiah, I think, who after 100 years or 150 years of sucking children off into the fiery pits, goes and rediscovers the Bible because they lost track of it, and he blows it off, and he's like, and he
you're not going to believe what this says.
Yeah, we ought to get back to this. I feel like sometimes that's what we're doing in F3, is we're saying, no, that's not true. That's not good. There is such a thing as good.
There's absolute truth.
Right. Yeah. And that ain't good. Or this is better, because life is a series of trade-offs where, here in this sinful world, and freedom is probably one of the most disabused and denatured words in our culture right now. Because when somebody says freedom, I often think what they mean is to be freedom from truth, free from criticism, free from disagreement, free from you having your own ideas.
Discomfort.
Yeah, freedom from that. And so that's why every 4th of July, I feel a little like, man, I mean, would we be capable of doing it again?
You mean the country or the?
Well, it wasn't a country then, was it?
Well, no, but fair. I mean,
I mean,
the revolution or of F3? It was what I was wondering. Like, which thing?
F3 was. Yeah. F3 ain't all that big a deal compared to the United States of America, right? Yeah. It's just kind of a little thing. But Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I find myself increasingly having to explain what July 4th is and what its role is historically in America to people that don't learn it anymore,
Yeah.
Mm.
or people that take these freedoms completely for granted.
Yeah. I think just to add to what Dredd says is that we have a society where that is sort of the overarching belief, right? Is that I should, what they believe freedom to be is I should have freedom from anything. It's the, goo being the theory of universal happiness, right? And that desired state. So I should have freedom from anything that even makes me remotely uncomfortable in any way, even for moments, not even momentarily uncomfortable. I shouldn't have to put up with that. I should have nothing but dopamine just pouring into my system constantly. And anything outside of that is not okay. And the thing that I find that unfortunately and fortunately, right, both together, that happens sometimes is I have three guys who take on just a tiny bit of that worldly tenor, right? That a little of that kind of gets, rubbed off on them. They catch a little goo on their shirt or something. And so they tend to think like, well, I'm free to lead. When what they mean is they think they're free to do whatever they want when they want.
Right.
And there's a yes and there, right? So a guy is absolutely free to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. Just like in America, you're free to do whatever you want, whenever you want. But you may have to suffer some consequence for that. Like I have the theoretical freedom, right, to drive as fast as I'd like. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but you don't have the freedom to not be part of the consequence of getting pulled over, right, and getting a ticket or going to jail or whatever it might be, depending on how fast you're going, I guess. But and so sometimes, and I find it's, maybe this is a little too behind the curtain, but I find sometimes that it's a little frustrating because I'm sitting here as the guy trying to lead this deal, right? Trying to follow after two incredibly strong leaders who came before me, right? And I'm saying, hey, I these are the things I think we need to get done. This is what I want to see happen, and so on and so on. And guys will be like, well, free to lead. And I'm like, well, absolutely. You're definitely free to lead, However, within the confines of this team, or, at the national level of leadership or something like that, you're free to lead based on the parameters, and the mission that we have and the things that we're trying to accomplish. I'm not always real interested in how you get there, but you're not free to just go in whatever direction you feel like. And so what ends up happening, and it's an F3, and I think it happens in companies, I think it happens in a lot of organizations, is a guy will say free to lead. And what he means is free to try and remake this in my own image, and to make it a me thing, to which I've started saying to guys, I think you're free to lead. What you should probably do is go start F4 and get out of my organization, right?
Yeah.
I don't really say that to people. No, but like there's a difference between free to do whatever I want and just run chaos, and free to lead.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because even like the Declaration of Independence, right? It was a document of freedom, but there were some guidelines, right? Or it's sort of like free to lead with, in pursuit of this sort of aligned mission, right? I think in my mind, and that's where I think you see some of the challenges today. I'm curious, this idea of telling the truth, or like, I keep thinking about candor, right, as one of the leadership principles in Q Source, and just that maybe, I don't know, do you guys feel like we are missing some of that, or is that required in order for things to sort of function in alignment towards a mission with everybody having freedom? I don't know if does that question make sense?
Yes, it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
That's why the founders, the drafters of the Constitution, made it the First Amendment. Those are not in random order. They didn't put it in a hat and pull one out. Oh, whoa, it's First Amendment's freedom of speech. No, it was based on the order of importance.
Yeah.
So the freedom to speak your mind, free assembly, worship how you see fit, that's absolutely necessary in a liberal democracy such as ours. In an organization that's a starfish and a lizard such as ours, it's also absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
So the burden that Dark carries, which is why I work very hard not to add to it, is that means that he has to, as a leader, suffer the slings and arrows of criticisms of people that have been told they're free to sling them. Like a guy DM'd me today and said, I don't know if this is protocol. I'm just DMing you. And he actually was complimenting me. I was like, thanking me. I was like, there's a protocol for you to contact me to Sunshine Bazooka me. Yeah. Yeah. But I said, number one, I said, thank you, honored. That's great. I said, yes, there is no protocol. You're of course free to DM me with your accolades as well as your criticism, because there's no other way for me to know what's going on. So Dark has inherited that from Slaughter, who inherited from me, which means that people are going to, and everybody's encouraged to disagree with them.
And believe me, they do.
Right.
They feel very free to tell me what a terrible leader I am and what a bad
Right.
job I'm doing.
Right. So, as the emeritus, I'm not going to add to that burden.
By what? By criticizing me?
By criticizing you. It's like somebody when I was the Nantan, a guy in the inner circle criticized me publicly, and I took him aside and I said, I mean,
why would you?
Do you feel like you can't talk to me? And he's like, well, I thought I said, yeah, but I mean, it's not that I hope have acted like I can't, I don't demand to hear the truth. But what I mean is, in the inner circle, I don't know if I'm demanding to hear it publicly, because what you're doing is instilling in the packs an idea that there's a schism in the leadership, that we're not of like mind.
Yeah. Or that it's okay to just blow up at me about whatever, whenever. And that's not, it's not really how we want guys to act.
There's a time, I'm not saying I wouldn't say to Dark if I disagreed with him, I wouldn't say to him, one-on-one, which is almost never the case anyway, or in a board meeting, I might push back
that's different.
Softly or generally, but.
But even pushing back on an idea is not criticizing me as a leader necessarily. Like you've pushed back on ideas plenty of times.
That's because you're a mature leader. Most leaders don't see the distinction between somebody offering constructive criticism and launching a personal attack. Here is a lawyer story I will tell. I had a lawyer this week in a case who said, I feel like I'm being personally attacked. And he's representing himself. And I didn't say it. I thought, what do you think? Yeah, we filed a lawsuit against you.
Yeah,
you chose to defend yourself.
Then yes, I'm personally attacking you.
I know why you feel that way. And if your feelings are justified, go hire a lawyer so you don't have a fool as a client anymore. But, it is funny how I think it's kind of when you read some of the interchanges that leaders had throughout history, like, wow, the way they just went after each other, we've lost that ability to have hot spirited debate.
Yeah.
And then shake hands afterwards and say, all right, man, I see where you're coming from, or hell, I don't see where you're coming from, but I'm still with you. It's rare, right? It's so rare. Look at Trump and Musk blowing up at each other. I thought did you guys catch that?
Like the little Twitter battle they had, and like
yeah,
a few weeks ago.
I mean, on a Tuesday, Musk is dancing around on the stage with a MAGA hat,
right? And on Friday,
on Thursday, he's like,
I'm pretty sure he's on the Epstein list.
He's on the Epstein list. And I thought, if you have a criticism, well, that was just absolute horrible leadership in my mind,
Yeah.
It's shocking.
Again, right. but then again, we're looking at these guys as if they're leaders sometimes. And
right.
The fact that Musk has built giant corporations and doesn't mean he knows a darn thing about leadership other than what he instinctively knows. Instinctively, he probably is probably pretty good.
Well, and I would say, to be fair, he knows a fair amount about leadership or leading a company, but he may not know a ton about virtuous leadership.
Right.
And I would just draw the distinction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good distinction.
Yeah, I sometimes I think you hear, and I don't know if I'm in a bullfrog organization, not quite a lizard, so I'm it's like, well, you need to be transparent, but then there's also sort of like there's some boundaries to that, because you also need to maintain executive presence or whatever that means, right? And so then it's like candor is like a thing. We want to tell the truth, but I don't think it's the hard truth. We don't want to hear the hard truth, but we want to hear like your truth is how I maybe hear it worded. But I don't know.
There's no such thing as your
transparent. Transparent is right up there with vulnerable in my mind. Vulnerable and authentic.
Oh, yeah, I can see these
in words that are just absolutely meaningless when it comes to leadership. I mean, I do not wish my leaders to be transparent at all. If they have weaknesses or fears, go talk to your shield lock about it. Don't come out here and stand in front of us and tell us, because I'm looking to you to inspire me and if I'm afraid, the last thing on earth is I want to see my boss is afraid, unless he's saying it in terms of, yeah, of course I'm afraid, but I'm
we're all afraid, but I'm going to overcome it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I'm going to do it anyway. That kind of thing.
Right.
But this idea of what does it actually mean anyway? When we say leaders are supposed to be transparent, they're supposed to nakedly display everything that's going on in their mind, everything they're doing at all times. I mean, that makes no sense whatsoever.
Even if there was, even from the emotional, like interpersonal side of it, even if that was somehow okay, and I agree with Dredd that it's not, but even if it was, even just from an information standpoint, you don't need to know everything that's going on.
Need to know
that's
that.
ridiculous.
Yeah,
I don't need to know that.
Dredd, did you want to know, by the way, the outcome of my meeting earlier with GoRuck about the codes and all that?
No,
but Dredd, I'm trying to be transparent.
I trust you. That you have F3's best interest in mind.
But you'd trust me more if I was transparent with you.
I would not.
Dredd, I'm trying to be vulnerable.
No. The first time ever we have tears on the Whetstone.
I mean, when
not a chance.
Trump comes out and he says, within 14 days, right, I'm going to do something with Iran.
Yeah.
And then he did it 3 days later, and he's getting all sorts of heat about, well, you said it was going to be in 14 days. I thought,
he said within.
Well, why wouldn't you? Do you really want the Iranians sitting there for 14 days and get ready on day 14? It's a surprise attack, you knuckleheads. I mean, I know the whole transparency thing is so crazily dumb. I don't even know how to respond to it.
Yeah.
I mean, corporately, how can you protect shareholder value if you're transparent?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't, Plugoo. All this talk about freedom. It's really just another word for nothing left to lose. Really is.
Yeah.
Not getting late.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Yeah. That was beautiful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it.
That's me and Bobby McGee.
Me and my Bobby McGee.
Okay.
Janis Joplin.
Yeah.
Sung by Janis Joplin, written by
Leonard Bernstein.
Chris Christopherson.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I always assume Leonard Bernstein wrote everything, so that's always my go-to.
He's written a lot of songs.
He's written a lot of stuff. Yeah.
But he didn't write.
Chris Christopherson's written a lot of songs too.
Crowns, I was climbing fast. Built a house of mirrors, couldn't make it last. Thought a title, man, I found my name. But the higher I got, the more I felt the shame. Then a brother spoke what I wouldn't say. Said you're not a king, just a man in the way. So I laid it down at the edge of the gloom, where iron sharpens and egos lose. Well, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. I gave up the lies, picked up the truth. Found myself in the heat of the proof. I'm lighter now, stronger too. 'Cause I've got nothing left to nothing left to prove. It's a cross I bear, the shield locks dirt and answer prayers. It's showing up when I got no plan, just faith in the next right step as a man. I've led from the front, I've failed from the back. I found real strength in the things I lack. So take the mic, take the seat, take the praise. I'll be the stone that sharpens blades. 'Cause I've got nothing left to prove. Just another word for nothing left to lose. Now the throne, just a truth I choose. I'm a son of a sinner, a man who moves. And if I fail, let the mission resume. I'm free now, I've got nothing left to prove. For freedom is just another word for